Good. So good morning to everybody here in the room, and good morning to everybody out there in ICC land. Can't see you, but I know Michael can see you over here. Michael will be in touch and reflecting any comments you make or questions you raise later on in the panel discussion. So welcome to the panel discussion about ChatGPT. And we're going to have three very distinguished guests talk about their view of this and what it might mean for us in language teaching and in education and life in general. And they're each going to talk for a few minutes, and then we're going to have a panel discussion between them and with people here in the room and questions from you in the audience overseas and online as well. And hopefully we will reach an understanding of where this is all taking us. We do have a special extra guest, a secret extra guest on the panel today, and that is Mr. or Mrs. ChatGPT. I've got her or him, Una suggested that we use them. I've got them here, and already I've got some input from their view on the dangers and advantages for language learners. So we can talk about what they feel about. So first, it's my pleasure to introduce everybody on the panel. My name is Michael Carrier, formerly of the British Council, and here on my right, first we have Una Magia, who's the college director and principal of the University of Northampton International College, a strategic leader for international higher education, who's worked in Canada, Bahrain, New Zealand, and in the UK. And next to me here on my right is Alexandra Skoko-Despinic. Have I said that right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Very hard to say. Who's head of software development and statistical research support in the Statistical Office of the Government of Serbia. Her specialism is in database management, data protection, AI, artificial intelligence, and innovations in these fields. I think we need to return to the AI thing. I think it's artificial unintelligence, but that's another question for later. And on my left, we have Nikolai Slavkov, who you've already heard during the conference, who is the Associate Professor of Official Languages and Bilingualism Institute in Ottawa, and also at the same time, Director of the Canadian Centre for Studies and Research on Bilingualism and Language Planning, CICERBL. That's a very long title. We could make it cerebral. You put an extra vowel in there. It would be a good acronym, wouldn't it? So we're very lucky to have these panelists. Thank you so much for coming to join us. We'll start, I think, with setting some context. Una has volunteered to go first to set a wider context about what this means in the context of education and especially higher education. And then we'll move on to Alexandra's looking at it from the technical and broader societal point of view, and then Nikolai on the aspects of language learning. So please prepare lots of questions, comments, concerns, worries, fears, terrifications, whatever you feel, and we'll talk about those later on. So let me start with Una, if you'd like to.
Sure. Thank you very much, Michael, for the very kind introduction. We're very honoured to be here. Thank you for the kind invitation to join you today. And thank you to our colleagues who are joining online. So we hope you're able to interact as much as you wish. So I guess I'll throw something out here. Michael, you mentioned AI. I think it could mean artificial interference. Maybe we can have a little, we might be able to come up with some other ones today. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Of course, we know it's sort of seemed to have erupted into the news in the last sort of 3-4 months. Interestingly, that I moved from New Zealand back to the UK to work, so that it's just sort of come online as I came online. So I've been following that journey. And in my context is dealing with solely international students, and I come from a languages background, so hopefully I can bring a little sense from each of those. So the first thing I think is that in context, you know, it's another world shift. We've come off the back of a pandemic. Some of us would argue that it's still going, and it's a disruptor. So we've only got two things we can do with disruptors. We can fight them, push them back, or we embrace them. I can see some of our colleagues here nodding. We know that in certain global higher education contexts, people are bringing that on board and saying, what can we do with it? There's a lot of chat around assessment, which I'll talk to in a second. And then the other piece, interestingly, people like the great Noam Chomsky pushing back on it, saying it shouldn't be allowed. So that very sort of binary sense of, do we embrace it and take it in? Or do we say, no, it's another rule that's being broken, and therefore we have to create another set of rules that we will adjudicate and review and manage and respond to through the education process. So I can give you my disclaimer here. I'm an embracer. I don't see the point in arguing with it. Also because, as Sandra will probably tell you, ChatGPT can't really argue with you. That's the point. In terms of education, I mean, a word that's overused, but let's use it anyway. It could be the base of more innovation. We think about what we're trying to do in education, and in the context of employability, 21st century skills, work-based skills, this innovation can be, in my view, leveraged to enhance our learning and teaching processes, and also to look at how our learners can, in that culture context, become more comfortable. And when I was thinking about this today on the plane over last night, I was thinking, what would it mean for my learners? And my learners use ChatGPT because they're desperate to pass. They pay £12,000 for 26 weeks tuition. They've got 4 generations of familial funds in the bank. They can't afford to fail. My personal disposition around education is it's our job to bring the learner as close to the pass line as possible, not to create barriers to stop them. And if we create frameworks of quality enhancement and assurance, those frameworks are there to protect the learner and to help them understand what the expectations are, what they need to do to get there, what it will look like, what it will feel like, and what it will, what it will mean for them, embodied usually in the rubrics that we produce, the program documents, etc. When I think of it on a more macro level, in terms of, and obviously I'm not the expert here, but from my knowledge of being a teacher, teaching languages, cultural studies, etc., we're looking at bringing our learners into a space where we facilitate the enhancement of their knowledge and skills. The employability agenda is skills-based. And what we know is we want to engender criticality, organization, communication, all of those skills that we need so desperately in the workplace. So the obvious point for me is that we can leverage ChatGPT, artificial interference, artificial involvement, to focus on the process of learning and that kind of moving from the unistructural output to the abstract output through the multi-structural output. If you're looking at conceptualization on the learning curve. Therefore, the leveraging point for me is that we use artificial intelligence to push learners into collaborative ways of working, embodied ways of understanding knowledge, reflexive practice within the learning domain rather than reflective, so working in the cyclical domain. And I think the other thing is that then, while we know in language output is almost everything, as we know, those of us that are here today, I'm sure we would agree, often the most important part is that the drafting or the redrafting in our heads of how we come to that language, or the focus on process. So hence my position here. I believe it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think we can embrace it. I think we need to be careful with it. And it's going to be a hell of a lot of work for those people who work in quality assurance units, because we're going to have to redefine, and we are already redefining rules and regulations around assessment, plagiarism, and also the licensing bodies that we use to help us support that work. That's going to make a shift for them, I would imagine. Turnitin is working very hard, and rightly so. So, I mean, I'm looser, I guess, in my domains of practice. I think that we bring learners close to the line. I think we enact judgments when a learner cheats. They pay the price, they get their cap to reset, and then we move on. And we try to understand what's driving them towards that cheating phenomenon. I think from a language point of view, it's tricky, and I'm sure that we're going to hear a lot more about that. But my view is that we embrace it. And I also don't think it's as clever as a person ever could be. It's only as clever, like Paddington Bear said, it is the marmalade sandwich of innovation. It's only going to taste as good as it can when you've put enough marmalade into it. So I think that my lovely friend Sandra is going to talk to you a bit more about what that kind of marmalade looks and feels like. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's excellent. I love the marmalade sandwich image of ChatGPT. It's lovely to think of it as a disruptor, and we've got used to the idea of disruption in the last 20, 30 years. The whole concept of disruptive innovation in all of the aspects of our lives, from computers to Netflix, iPhones replacing digital cameras and so on. Lots of businesses have closed down because of disruption, and we've embraced that. So maybe that's the way for us to go here. There will be casualties along the way. Just ask Kodak, who completely closed the company down because smartphones could take all the photos they needed, and they didn't believe in digital cameras and digital photos. So that's a very good idea to put in our heads. So next, let me ask Alexandra to talk a little bit from her perspective about the benefits, the worries, the concerns, and how it works. Can you explain how it works?
Hello, hello to everyone. I'm very happy to be here to participate in this panel, although I'm a little bit embarrassed because all of you are English professionals and my English is not so good, but I will give my best. I would say it's far too soon to say what would be the benefits and what would be the bad sides of artificial intelligence in general. It's not only in education, but on our civilization. We can only hope so, and we can give our best to, as Una said, to embrace all the good aspects of ChatGPT in education. So what would I say? I've been working for many years in IT, and I remember when I started working, my boss told me, you will start working as a programmer when you read all the books on one shelf, which was 3 meters high and 5 meters wide. So you have to read them all. And I really did have to do that to start working. I have to remember all the commands, everything. Now I don't, and my younger colleagues, my people who are working for me now, they don't remember. They just have to be aware that something is, some command is somewhere, and I will Google it. So the perspective how the people are learning is changed since I start working till now. So they don't remember anything. They just need pointers that there is something, and I will find the information. So definitely IT and Google changed the way how the people are, what kind of information, they will just pick what kind of information they will memorize, of course. And other part is you will find it if you're aware that something like that exists. ChatGPT put another step ahead in that direction. So you don't have even to code anymore. You have to just say, I will do the basic coding and you check it for me and do it writing for me. It's even easier. So the code writers obviously won't be needed anymore. What is interesting, I think, we have to find the way to take the best out of the GPT. We have the offer. Technology gives us the offer. It depends on us, not only as in education, but like civilization. What are we going to do with it? There are different, let's say, groups of people, the people who welcome it, and another who say, okay, we are not as a human, we are not ready for it. Let's go step by step. Don't push it so fast. Let's see, like what first phase is okay. Let's wait for a little bit for another one. So I think like I just told, it was quite funny. My mother used to tell me when she was young and when the computers start to show up, they were not computers in school, obviously. And she said, I remember I was reading it in newspapers, then by the time next generation comes, they will forget to write. They won't need to know how to write. And they said, okay, they will have all the fingers the same. because they will type so much, their fingers will be the same. Of course, lots of people, nothing of course of that happened, but lots of people give some ideas which we don't know are they going to happen or not. So I think some of these things are good topic for sociologists. So we have technology rising every day, and the gap in between technology, IT, and our development as a humans is increasing. I think that might be a problem because we are not sometimes aware the power of some technologies, gadgets. Among that is ChatGPT. And as Una said, I was reading about what Noam Chomsky said. Of course, we respect him all very much. He's the biggest philosopher. And among the others, he said, okay, we have to be very careful, and maybe we should avoid ChatGPT, especially in higher education. But the question is how to ban it. I think it's not possible. Because I think the students from Princeton, they had some software who can detect some written using IE or not. But as soon as you find some software, you will have another software who will overcome it. And if you, as a university, lots of university banned on their network level to access ChatGPT. But of course, students, you have telephones, you have laptops, you have other gadgets. Even if you don't have other gadgets, you can use VPN connections to overlap the gadget who is forbidding you to access. So I think it's not possible to ban ChatGPT. The main issue is what Una said, how to embrace and how to use the most from that technology. Our students, your students, are going to live in artificial intelligence world. And education has to learn, young people, a young generation, how to step into the world of artificial intelligence, how to push the best, and what are the dangerous points of ChatGPT and artificial intelligence as well. I can continue, but I think
we'll return later.
Yeah.
And do more. Thank you very much, Alexandra. I love the comment from your mother about people using their fingers. I was just checking to see if my fingers are okay. But of course, one of the interesting things about the wider technology that includes ChatGPT, I wish they could make it easier to say, is that we won't actually need our fingers to type questions. Joe Dale, who was on the online conference yesterday, shared a link with us to a new system where you can use your voice. I think it's a Chrome extension. So you can use your voice. You just speak to ChatGPT and it will give you some answers. And what we were just talking about in a coffee break, what some of the leading researchers are doing now is brain control of software in general. So that you can now put on electrodes on your brain and you can speak, not even speak, just think a sentence and it's written on the computer. So you could think a whole text and it would just be written on the computer. It's not perfect yet, it's not ready, but just imagine then we can think ourselves into ChatGPT and then see what comes out of that. Very interesting, perhaps a little scary as well. So moving to Nikolai, who's going to talk a little bit more about the language learning aspects of this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Where do I start? With a disclaimer that I am really not very well familiarized with ChatGPT. So I accepted this kind invitation with the hope to actually learn a lot about it and take this opportunity to discuss its potential and its challenges with the idea that I may not be very proficient user of ChatGPT yet. A second point I want to say is that if anyone either online or here in the audience was hoping that there will be some sort of debate or controversy on this panel, I think you'll be disappointed because it sounds like we are more or less on the same page. It sounds like we're all thinking of how we can leverage and potentially use this type of technology to our advantage, while at the same time acknowledging its limitations and perhaps even its dangers in terms of ethical aspects, in terms of educational aspects, cognitive aspects. Now on to the responsibility of bringing in the discussion a little bit into the language learning domain. There's quite a lot of experimenting to be done with this, and I'm sure it's already being done. I actually have colleagues who are way ahead of me in terms of experimenting with how we can harness the potential of ChatGPT into language teaching and learning. A couple of really kind of superficial thoughts that would maybe only scratch the surface. I think in discourse analysis, there was way back, there was this term called synthetic personalization. Yeah. And so I think it's a very interesting idea because these algorithms are really, really good at giving us the impression that they're human. When I tested ChatGPT, I just couldn't help. I did not use a voice extension. I just used typing. I'm a fast typer, and I just pulled out my computer and started talking to ChatGPT, and it was really a powerful experience of how I felt like maybe there was just a human on the other end responding to my chat types and responding very appropriately. So after a while, I felt like, this is very bizarre. I have to keep reminding myself that I'm talking to an algorithm, right? Yeah. And so I think that's a very important consideration. Now, how can we harness this already outstanding achievement of technology? One thing that I reflected upon is our constant need of teachers and lack of teachers. I was speaking to Eleanor this morning and many other people who keep saying, you know, we lack teachers. And even when we have teachers, if we put a teacher with a certain number of students in a classroom, then the one-on-one interaction between the teacher and the student is so limited. Yeah. A lot of time they get, you know, they may be taking classes every day, but the amount of absolute interaction between the teacher and the student could be just a few minutes a week or something like that. And so I was thinking ChatGPT may be an amazing tool for us. We all know that language is learned through interaction. And a lot of the time in the classroom, you know, we do our best, we interact with the students, we do small group discussions, we try to make sure that students interact with each other and so on and so forth. But in ChatGPT, I do see a potential, really, really fluent conversation partner. If you want to ask students to practice, whether it's conversational skills or whether it's some sort of higher level academic research building skills, it's as if you're talking to a librarian. When I was testing ChatGPT, I have to write this chapter by the end of June on a very interesting topic that I'm not very well versed in. It's decolonialization. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce this word very well. And in language education. And I thought, could I ask ChatGPT to write this chapter for me? I won't, of course, be cheating. I would acknowledge it. I would check in with the editors. I would use ChatGPT as a tool to maybe do some basic groundwork for me. And then using my critical skills, analysis, knowledge, further research, I might be able to fine-tune, modulate this and turn it into a high quality product. Of course, I'm only, please don't contact the editors of that volume, because I'm really kind of playing with this idea yet. I haven't really decided on doing that, but I'm trying to extrapolate this experience to the experience of a student who is, like we already said on the panel, who really needs to get close to the passing line. And that also reminds me of years ago, I used to teach at our university a beginner level writing course for students who are like that. They have borrowed money from generations in their families. They have paid this money and they expect the university to teach them writing skills so that they can continue in their program. And we kind of make them hate this because we tell them, write this 5-paragraph essay and, you know, have a solid introduction, then 3 solid arguments and then a conclusion. And then, you know, they may need to do some cultural adjustments. They certainly need more support in terms of, you know, advancing their language skills to a level where they can do this comfortably. And I just think with ChatGPT, poof, this is all gone. This stress is gone for these students because ChatGPT was not able to produce the complex chapter that I was trying to get it to produce. In fact, it crashed a few times trying to do that. However, maybe I'm not experienced yet in getting it to do it in the way that I wanted to do it. But a 5-paragraph essay I tried, it was so quick and so easy and so good. So this is a huge potential for these learners who could use it as a resource. And in fact, I started wondering, do we even need these essay writing skills anymore? Right? I mean, a lot of these students would become engineers, work in IT, they may write code, they may not even write code anymore, as you were mentioning. So what's the big benefit of asking them to reflect on healthcare in a 5-paragraph essay? I'm not too sure. So I think it gives us the potential of reflecting critically on the way we teach language and on the way we teach these cognitive skills or higher level 21st century skills. It also gives this tool in the hands of our learners. And I think it's a type of complicated dance that we need to execute, for lack of a better word, and find ways that continue to promote knowledge and give them knowledge, but also alleviate their burden and not make them feel so stressed about doing things that they may not be ready to do and that they may never need to do in life. So I think that this is a potentially challenging but promising avenue that we can explore as language teachers. I know at my university there is no consensus about the use of ChatGPT. I know that some people have reverted back to we cannot use computers when we do exams. Because when we do exams, we'll again maybe ask you to write a 5-paragraph essay or some other type of maybe more appropriate, more relevant piece of writing, but we will deprive you from all the resources that you would that you could draw on, so that we know that it's really you who did this, and so that we know that you avoid cheating. And that's one approach. Another approach will be also to say, why don't we see what we will do, what you will do when we give you the resources that you have, because this is natural and normal and very authentic, right? So you would potentially have these jobs and these resources on the job one day and in your life. So is it really necessary? Is it fair? Is it ethical for us to test you and assess you in this artificial way by depriving you of the resources that you would have normally in your daily life and in your job? So like I said, there's this continuum. I think there's a continuum of approaches towards this. And I am definitely, my personal opinion is that we should try to let people use the resources that are available. And maybe just one more minute, because I think I realized I spoke too long. I wanted to also think of the ethical aspects of acknowledging the use of ChatGPT, but also ChatGPT acknowledging the use of our data. Because we know how we're always trained in high school, maybe in university for sure, to never plagiarize, never take other people's ideas and portray them as our own. And so, you know, I think it's easy for us to simply acknowledge how we use ChatGPT in any kind of output that we submit or present somewhere, whether it's a presentation at a conference, whether it's a paper that we write, whether it's a summary or an essay. It's very easy. You just list it in the resources, or you could even describe how you use it, which may be interesting for others, especially in this early stage of our experience with ChatGPT. But a very complex issue is, we know that as soon as we sign up for the tryout of ChatGPT, everything that we say, every single interaction that we have with this not human, this algorithm, goes into feeding it, into training it to respond perhaps even more appropriately and in more sophisticated ways in the future. So for me, this is a way murkier part of the equation, because you know, I mean, I could spend hours reading the legalese and the terms and conditions that I agreed to, but to be frank with you, when I signed up for it, it was in the middle of the night and I didn't feel like doing it. And I bet you most of us don't do that, right? We just click agree, but we really don't know in this complex algorithm where all our ideas and data feed into, and when and how they may be recycled into something else, potentially, for sure not acknowledged, but potentially distorted or abused. So here is where I would like to know a little more from the tech industry, and I would like to, I would hope that they will take their ethical responsibility of transparency in this aspect. I will stop here, even though I have more things on my notes, but thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Nikolai. Thank you. What we'd like to do now is we'll ask for a discussion amongst the panelists, bearing in mind that you're sending in your questions. I can see on the chat on the screen that people are sending in questions and comments, and we'll come to you in a second and ask you to pose those questions directly to the panelists. But first, let me give a little bit of input from ChatGPT. I asked it this morning, or them. We have to come up with a name. Frida, whatever. Actually, Alice, as in Alice Lovelace, right? What are the benefits of ChatGPT for English language teaching? And the response with 5 points. I love the way they always give numbered headings. So conversational practice. Chat can provide students with a platform for practicing English conversational skills by engaging in conversation with the AI. Well, that's especially helpful if they use the voice extension, and then the voice recognition, speech recognition, it means it's actually real speech that the student is producing, and that chat is understanding that and coming back to it. The whole thing about speech recognition is one of my personal favorites that we should all be learning a bit more about. Lots of problems with that too. Second point, personalized feedback. Chat can provide instant feedback on students' responses. By analyzing the student's input, chat can provide tailored feedback on grammar, pronunciation, and syntax. I think we need to check whether that actually happens accurately or not. So maybe somebody would do a little research practice, you know, sort of give it some bad language and see what comes out.
Yeah.
The other ones are very obvious. Accessibility, everybody can access it. Motivation can be fun and engaging. Natural language processing, chat can process the real input from students so that they can be more authentic. That was interesting. It didn't give anything beyond that. But some of the points that you all raised are very interesting. I think everybody agreed, as you said, Nikolai, everybody wants to embrace it.
Yeah.
I think the general idea from our panel is that we should embrace that. But you said something, Alexandra, which is interesting, that we should go step by step. And there are kind of phases. Could you say a little bit more about what you think the steps are for us to embrace this going forward?
I would first say, maybe, do we want to embrace it or not? We just face the fact that we don't have an option. We have to embrace it. So there's no other way. We just, we have to see it as some, just like with calculator step into the schools. Everybody were forbidding calculators, but in the end, we have to have it. They said the children will forget to multiply or divide. They will use the calculators, yes, and they will just develop some other skills. I think we have to be aware that artificial GPT in a way can, some people are afraid that can influence critical thinking. We have to be aware that the output we get from machine is output from machine. It's not the human output and necessarily not true. So we have to check all the facts we get as the answer on our question. I remember once somebody asked somebody, can artificial intelligence think? The answer was artificial intelligence can think as much as some submarine can swim. True. So yes, it does go through the water, but it does not swim. Artificial intelligence and ChatGPT will give you the answer, but it is a machine. It is an algorithm who operates with huge amount of data. And I'm sorry I didn't bring some interesting video how artificial intelligence works. It is some chicken on a desk and the food is always on a blue spot. And every time she sees a blue spot, she takes the food and they keep bringing different colors and she skips different colors, always trying to reach the blue spots. The same is how ChatGPT and artificial intelligence works, learning on a huge amount of data. And after that, underneath story is only algorithm that human writes. So it, of course, it's not necessarily it has to be true. So we have to develop our critical thinking. We are living in a world in which we have to not criticize, but to think, is it true? Maybe it is true, but the truth is from shown in a different way. So we have to maybe I have two daughters and I'm trying to teach them, don't take everything as a fact, criticize. We've been in COVID, think about that. Is it true? Or maybe there is some other aspect of that fact so we are on a source of lots of information, not only from ChatGPT. We have, especially the kids, they don't use TV anymore, they use social networks. So you have to be very careful.
So in a way, you're saying there should be, there are phases, there are steps as we go forward. If we want to embrace it or we feel that we have to embrace it, we mustn't take it unquestioningly.
Of course.
We have to learn a new approach. We have to learn.
Yes. It has to be assistant, not a master.
So we have to learn how to redefine critical thinking. And that especially comes into what you said about redefining quality a little bit. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I'm just listening to our learned colleagues. A couple of things have come into my mind. So there's a difference between exercising judgment and producing judgment. You know, the teacher domain for me is there are two critical domains in teaching. One is creativity. So you have a set of rules, a set of data, a set of stuff, a set of learners. How are you going to bring those together? And in that moment, the ZPD, the zone of proximal development, or your teachable moment or their learning moment, that's when the real secret sauce is deployed, in my view. Okay, so what ChatGPT can do is it can produce judgments. You can ask it for judgment, it will produce it. I also thought as you were talking, change careers, train to be an algorithm writer. That's where the money's going to be, right? I think also thinking about the learner. So my career has been a really happy one, I'm glad to say, and I've met many learners over my 30+ years in education, adult education, post-secondary education, higher education, further education. Learners crave engagement. Why do learners fail? I just sat at a panel board on Friday with my colleagues and said, okay, what's the correlation between achievement, retention, and engagement? So those that don't turn up are not engaging. If they don't engage, they're not being retained. They're not being retained because they don't achieve. Why didn't they achieve? Because they didn't come, because they didn't engage. Not coming is a form of disengagement. So the real challenge in higher education at the moment for all of us is to keep retention and engagement high. So in layman's terms, ensuring the learners are getting the experience they crave. If you go back 15 years, I remember writing a book chapter on the diaspora of the Irish diaspora in the Middle East, teaching why they were so popular, because they had engaging methodologies of learning and teaching. And there were lots of us who were well trained who needed jobs, and Ireland didn't have jobs for us. Learners loved them because they had this level of engagement that they hadn't seen before, because they had a different type of cultural engagement. So it's about the third thing that's come out of our colleagues, and reflecting on what they're saying is linked to that is authenticity of engagement. And language, if it's not about authenticity, then what is it about? Because it's a reflection of culture and many, many more things. So I think the opportunity is the shift. For me, I'm just thinking about that. If you want that authentic engagement, the learner needs more of you. I never met a learner who didn't want to see more of their tutor, honestly. You know, you'll know this from many of you when you do the student satisfaction surveys. My teacher doesn't give me feedback, but you spend 5 minutes every day in the corridor saying, yeah, and if you do this, and how about this? And that's feedback. So not understanding that full gamut of engagement. I think we can use this to take out some of the headache of general feedback. And you've got that positioning for yourself to really dig into the authentic feedback, you know, the real scrutinization of the granular feedback that the learner needs. And also using it as a training artifact. Okay, you want to start fiddling around, you're not sure about, you know, question tags, have a crack with ChatGPT and see what it does for you, see if it tells you. And then the big piece is the ethics and the discernment. If you're going to that higher level skills place, writing the essays, some of you may love essays, some of you don't, may not. I don't really think they're great. I'm not sure whenever you have to write an essay for your boss, the most I ever write is a 2-page report because my boss doesn't read anything more than that, etc., etc. Are we, you know, ask yourself a philosophical question. When we set the 5,000-word essay, are you just asking the learner to do what you did 25 years ago? Because that's how they made you pass. So if it was good enough for me, it's good enough for them. Number two, what can ChatGPT do to alleviate your burden? I was just thinking, ask ChatGPT to write your lesson plans and see what it does. Save yourself some time. I need to teach question tags to 17 learners of 9 nationalities that speak 5 different languages. Help me out here. Here's my learning objective. I've got 50 minutes. What would you do? And then your time could be spent saying, well, that's rubbish. That's not going to work. No, I know that learner won't do this. So taking this bit out, I'm going to shift this here. We could start to use it and demonstrate it back to our learners. You could co-create lesson plans with ChatGPT and learners. So I think ethics are huge. That's what unis are tussling with. Ethical bodies are naturally conservative for very good reasons. And at the university that I'm based at the moment, there's a real split. Interestingly, the science-based, what I call the pure sciences, are anti-ChatGPT, even though most of them will produce graduates who go and work in algorithm writing, which is the hilarious point. And most of the liberal arts and social scientists are saying, yeah, bring it in, come on. So I think there's a lot for us to think about. Ultimately, one thing is very clear to me, it can't replace a human. We know that it isn't human. And one of the things we aspire to doing through the acquisition of language, which in itself is a set of skills, knowledge, dispositions, it can't replicate things like attitudinal intonation. It can't replicate paralinguistic skills. And we know that much of a language is built around paralinguistic interaction. So if we're worried about how safe we are, you're even safer. But your safety will be enhanced, I think, through the embracing of that technology, not the deflection of it. That's where I'd stand. As a long-standing language learner myself, I have lots of thoughts too. And my best linguistic moments have been when I'm talking to another human.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that's going to change. We hope not. Otherwise, we're out of a job.
Well, that's very interesting. I love the idea of co-creating lesson plans.
Yeah, why not? Do it.
And Nicola, that comes back to something that you said, that because of a lack of teachers, we could use ChatGPT for teacher support. So it'd be interesting to get your view on what kind of support, like writing lesson plans, but what other kind of support can ChatGPT do? And just one little point technologically, of course, ChatGPT at the moment is text-based. I said we could use voice control to talk to it, but what we've not talked about is that it could talk back to us using speech synthesis, which is now very clever. So it will soon be possible just to have a completely audio-based conversation in both directions. So what do you think it can do for teachers?
Yeah, I mean, yes, we did mention a few of those. I think certainly help learners with writing skills, providing feedback to learners, which is very time consuming for teachers, right? A lot of the time we spend hours on end for a number of assignments, and if there is an algorithm that can do that legwork for us, we could limit the amount of time we spend on providing feedback, or we can focus on our feedback critically on aspects that the algorithm hasn't or cannot provide feedback. I also think I wanted to, I know this kind of deviates slightly from your question, but I also wanted to say something about the loss of certain skills. Because I not specifically about ChatGPT, but I can tell you that I use DeepL, the automated translation engine, a lot, because I work at a bilingual institution, like I mentioned yesterday, and so I do a lot of my communications in English and French. And so, for example, when my English is, I'm very comfortable in English, there's no problem, and I work very fast in English, but in French, it's a challenge for me. I work much more slowly, and especially in my written French, it's at the level that I need to spend a long time to compose an email and respond to a French email. So I use DeepL all the time. DeepL always writes better than me in French, and I just edit what DeepL produces for French output, and then I paste that email and then I send it, and it works well. But what I realized is that by relying on DeepL, it really makes things more efficient for me. And I work faster, and it produces better output that I can produce. At the same time, I'm losing that skill, right? Because I reached a certain level of French writing, and then since I started relying on DeepL all the time, I'm not practicing my French writing. I'm not really kind of pushing myself cognitively to develop my French writing skills. And they've certainly stalled or perhaps even deteriorated. So I wonder with ChatGPT if certain skills are going to be affected as well. And it's a big discussion whether we need to push for the preservation of those skills, or maybe skills are evolving and we won't need them in the future. So we maybe not need to focus on them.
That's very interesting. Before turning it over to the audience, let me just give you a little bit more from our friend ChatGPT themselves. I asked, what are the dangers of ChatGPT for language learners? And they said 5 points, some which we've already touched on. Lack of human interaction. It's an AI-powered model, which means that it cannot provide the same level of human interaction. However, what I just said about speech going in both directions, which will be available, I would imagine, later this year, might change that. Although there still is a limited student ability to practice fluently in real-world scenarios. But some of these AI avatar-based language learning situations are already going in this direction. Some of you may know about IELO, AIELO, which is a commercial company doing artificial intelligence-based language learning using avatars. You talk to the avatar, it looks like a hotel receptionist, for example. Yep. And that's quite interesting. Second point, over-reliance on technology. Yes, that can always be a danger. So we're not focusing on other language learning strategies or losing some skills, as Nikolai says. This is the most important one, I think. Limited contextual understanding. Yeah. ChatGPT is designed to process natural language, but doesn't understand the cultural or social context in which. I'm sorry? The ChatGPT cannot understand the context, the cultural and social context in which the language is being used. So that leads to misunderstandings. Limited vocabulary. The system still has a limit on its vocabulary, and the ethical concerns which everybody's mentioned. But now what we'd like to do, with the help of Michael here, who's driving the online world, is get some of the questions and concerns or comments from our colleagues. Could you tell us some of those?
At the moment, I don't have any questions. I'm waiting to see if somebody,
Okay,
but I'd like to state a few things, if that's okay. I use ChatGPT, as Nikolai said, as a tool,
right.
no more than a tool. I'll take everybody back to the early 90s when we were first introduced to the internet, and we had similar reactions, and we used the internet as a tool, and we're using it today also, so we can have the hybrid meeting. So I'll use the word tool several times today, and we should use ChatGPT only as a tool. From a personal perspective, in my class, I had a class of C2 students, and they had difficulty with the writing task. My classes are hybrid classes, the majority of them. So I've got two computers open next to me at all times. So I opened up ChatGPT. I gave ChatGPT the role, stating that I'm an EFL teacher. We have a writing task. I gave him the theme of the writing task, and it gave me a writing task of around about 150 to 200 words, which I asked for. And I regenerated so I can have a second one. The first thing we did is read through the two writing tasks, and I asked my students whether did they find any mistakes. They did find 2 grammatical mistakes, okay, which is good, because they worked on it. And then we worked on it again, and I collected everything from my students, and I said, now let's write it on our own. Let's practice on our own. And they did fairly well. One more time, I forgot about a test which I had at a very, very low level of A1. And as soon as I walked into class, my students mentioned to me, well, what's happened with the test that you promised us? And I thought, oh God, I forgot all about it. So I opened ChatGPT. I give him the role again as an EFL teacher, and I asked GPT that I want 10 questions, please, with a multiple choice ABC answer. I would like it at an easy level. I press generate, okay. They gave me the 10 questions. I regenerated again. They gave me another 10 questions, okay. I had to read through it before I gave it to the students because they're very young at the age of, at a level of A1, especially in Greece, which I'm talking about, okay. So the tool worked for me in both situations. So Nikolai, I do agree, it is a tool, and we should use it as a tool and not as a must. Okay, so that's my opinion, and I'll have a look now at the questions. And
I'll see if there are any questions. Any questions from audience in the room? Yes, Nazan. Can you pass them microphone along? Thank you. It's on. You switched it off.
Yes, now it's okay. First of all, thank you very much. This is a very crucial issue at the moment for the English teachers. That's why before coming here in our institution, we were working on it. We are trying to find a kind of a solution, having a document for academic misconduct, talking about these AIs. So this is a real issue. And I would like to underline the thing that Nikolai mentioned, using it as a resource. At that point, the question in my mind is for the AI, especially the students, we need to work on the students to train them to use it as a resource, not using it as a kind of something for cheating. Because at the moment, because of COVID, maybe, I am not sure about it, but because of COVID, they are waiting for ready-made things in front of them. So we might need a kind of, that's why I totally agree that step by step.
And the process as well, the idea that you're focusing the learning, observing the learning through process, that getting to the product is the outcome. We talk about learning objectives, learning outcomes. I think you're right. You take the learners back through that process. And I would agree with you. And I think we have seen a shift, certainly in the conversations I have with colleagues, learners demand stuff quickly. I'll give you an example. The other day, a learner came in and said, I need to print something on the photocopy. And we said, it's not working. And they looked at me. I said, so what are you going to do? They said, I don't know. I said, have you got a phone? Yeah. Have you got an app on your phone? Yeah. Why do you need to print it? I need to scan it. So have you thought about looking for a free scan app? I mean, literally, that was a process that they weren't willing to engage in. So I think you've hit on something. Take the resource, bring it to the learner, bring the learner to it, and then train the learner around a set of expectations and criteria which map against your academic misconduct. That's exactly where the two things have to mirror each other. I think that's a brilliant suggestion and very timely.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Other questions? Yeah, Christos.
Thank you. So good morning to all. I mean, this is basically. Yeah. Okay.
You're back.
Great. Okay, so input output. This is basically what ChatGPT is. And I remember before using mobile phones, we could actually recall 10 to 15 phone numbers, just like that. Now my wife doesn't know my phone number. If the battery dies, that's it.
Not to do with technology.
She cannot call me. So I feel, and this is a question, do you feel that maybe by using so much of these tools, we will lose the skills? Because someone mentioned that we're going to lose basic skills. And I think this is one, like, for example, we have shorter memory right now because we use our phones for everything. We don't have to remember things anymore, right? Because we have them at the tip of at the press of a button. And you mentioned about being able to actually have programs that can see if this is written by artificial intelligence or not. And this is not scary for me because I think that, like antivirus programs, okay, a few years back, there were some really smart viruses that could actually overcome the antivirus barriers, but now it's becoming more and more difficult for them. I know that one of the most difficult viruses, they've been trying to break it for a few years, they actually broke it last week. So I think that we will reach a point when ChatGPT will not be able to overpass all the detectors. It will become like an antivirus. But what is really scary is that if you take a piece of writing, and you put it into ChatGPT and ask it, did you write this yourself? It can actually say yes or no. It can actually remember every piece of information it has produced for the users and say if it was written by itself or not. And for me, this is awesome. And also, because you mentioned like students trying to pass the exams and the risk they take. I mean, they had ChatGPT give the bar exam, the medical exam in the United States. So it's like it passed the medical exam for like 60%, the bar exam about 55%. So it would become a mediocre doctor or a lawyer right now. I know it has a lot of potential in the future to get better, but right now, can we actually base our own, like a student's future on ChatGPT?
And I think that's where the teacher
60%.
Yeah.
I think that's when the teacher becomes more important.
So these are my questions.
I think that's when your interaction with the learner becomes absolutely crucial. In that we're in a transition phase now. We know it's gonna start growing and growing. Going back to those things, they're not human. It isn't human. We are. And with all good assessment, going back to your idea around the frameworking, the quality assurance and assessment frameworking and misconduct, that's about creating, in my view, an alternative assessment where you get to see and enact your judgment and observation of the learner's capability. And if you take a capability focus, the output doesn't become less important, but the demonstration of skills does. So I think you've hit on something there.
I think the interesting suggestion has come forward that because of that we have to prove that people's capability in a slightly different way, because any written work may have been produced by ChatGPT. So somebody suggested, maybe lightheartedly, that we should go to the Italian system, where if you do a master's degree, you have a 4-hour oral interview.
Yeah.
And you defend your
Yeah,
knowledge or
yeah.
your understanding and your analysis verbally. So you've got no computers and no paper. So it's going at the same thing
Yeah.
from a
And
different
moving
point of view.
through that continuous assessment loop, you know, there's nothing to stop you creating, which I know in some cultures are more beloved than others, but we shifted with our learners. We have entirely international pre-degree, degree and pre-masters. So we, and some of the tutors weren't happy, but I moved it. I said, no, we're doing a long, thin, reflexive module, and it will be marked at certain points formatively. And then the capstone summative assessment includes your observation of classroom behaviors, attendance and engagement, because we have to, because of the visas. That has shifted how learners are engaging, and it's actually taken the workload away from the tutor. So, and I think that's what we're talking about, isn't it? Alternative assessment paradigms. So the challenge for you, depending on where you are, is how does your normative government ministry see those types of assessment, and can they welcome them? Do they feel right? Because the world over, we're still really wedded to, can you write 5,000 words and prove your knowledge about this? Christos's point, you need a nurse who, when you fall over and smash your head, is going to know instantly to pick you up, turn you over, move you. She's not going to write anything about this, or he isn't going to write anything about this. They're going to have that knowledge and they're going to apply it in the moment. So that's a skill. So, I mean, I think everything you're raising is on the money.
Can we follow up the point about losing skills? I mean, remembering phone numbers, and you talked about the skill of writing an essay and whether that was really necessary. What do you think from the language learning process? Can we change the skill pattern that we expect, or we change the process?
Yeah, thank you. I was listening with one ear to the discussion, and with one eye I was reading the chat where there were interesting comments there. I think skills evolve. So maybe losing skills. Yeah, I mean, it's okay to say losing skills, but maybe we should also think of reframing and having our skills change or evolve. And so, for example, I think with the introduction of digital technology like text messages, social media posts, we certainly produce much shorter texts. And I think somebody mentioned, oh, my boss doesn't read a report that's more than 2 pages.
Yeah.
And so think of a PhD thesis, the length of the PhD thesis, and how many people will actually read it. So maybe one effect that we definitely already see with the introduction of these sophisticated technologies, that our writing skills are becoming, we write less and less, shorter and shorter text. Even academic publications, like you submit to journals, they used to say, 10, 12,000 words. Now they say 7, 6, and so on. So that's an interesting development. The other thing there's a comment in the chat saying that from Joe Dale, I hear what is being said about losing skills, but asking ChatGPT to redraft what it produces on your prompts is a great way of fostering critical thinking skills, and AI will get better and better. Rubbish in, rubbish out. So that's a very interesting point, right? We all think of, and we really need to have good editing skills, and then keep asking ChatGPT. This is what I did with this chapter that I was playing with. It's like, it's not good enough, not good enough. I keep re-giving the prompts, and it was revising and revising, and sometimes giving different versions of something else. I thought, wow, what are the implications for the creation of knowledge? You may have several versions of different knowledge produced in different ways, so different angles, different aspects. But one thing I have to say in response to this is that we have to be very disciplined to keep asking ChatGPT to reframe and reproduce, right? Because sometimes imagine that it comes up with something good enough, and we kind of uncritically accept and say, okay, that's it, I'm happy with this, right? It's kind of like the human process, recursive process of writing, where we write, draft, redraft, revise, edit, proofread. This is a really, really long, anxiety-inducing, arduous process that all of a sudden we can delegate to an AI mechanism, right? And so maybe it's great, maybe it will take off some of our burden, but again, the responsibility of, are we gonna be responsible enough to make sure we ask the algorithm to redraft and to produce something that is valid? So that's kind of an important point.
Can we go into more detail about that, because I think there's an interesting technical question for Alexandra here, which is that we think that we're refining the text by asking it to redraft and redraft. Is it really refining, or is it just finding alternative matching out there? You know, in other words, it's not actually as intelligent as we think it is.
No, it's of course not intelligent. It just use lots of amount of data and give you the text which will most probably fit your needs. So of course you can give him ask from ChatGPT to make some report for you, but as Una said, you have to go through it, use some parts, change it to fit exactly your needs. Your needs. So you don't use it copy paste, use it as an input for changing something, writing maybe some reports, different reports. You can ask ChatGPT, okay, do it report for me, but not just to copy paste it. You just take some ideas, some topics, some bullets. I remember we used to, I travel a lot, and after every trip, I do have to write a long report for my bosses. So it's usually very boring, and I said, okay, let's do some testing. Are they reading actually this? So the last sentence was, you were yesterday in a restaurant, and I said, we were in a restaurant, and a singer was very nice dressed, but she was not so very nice singer. So I put some marks about the singers, and I gave it to my boss. What? Nobody said nothing. So obviously they don't reading it, and I used it, ChatGPT, to make some kind of report, but of course I make it I just use the parts of output ChatGPT gives me. So as Una said, you can use it for making plans.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important. You are the first step. When I said phasally, new generation, your students will be generation using artificial intelligence very much. So you are the one who will, I think the pressure will be on you to prepare these young people for the new world, to teach them ethic, to teach them how to use technology.
So almost a new skill set. Talking about some will become redundant, some will evolve. And I think the other thing that Nikolai is saying, and you're saying, is that when you're making some skills redundant and you're helping to grow others, which is what you've been talking about, and then you're doing, so we're redrafting. In that moment, we've created more space for ourselves to think about what is coming back to us. So surely what we leverage there is that space of criticality, critical reflection, discernment, analysis, and appropriacy. How appropriate is it? How much do I put in? Why do I write 2-page reports to my boss? She's a finance manager. She told me that. She said, I don't really know much about education. You seem to be very good at it. So just give me a report. I put the numbers at the top. She loves them. And I write all my nice stuff at the bottom, which I enjoy. So I think, so I know my audience. And she says, very well written. I moved it. I swapped it once. I put the writing at the top and the numbers at the bottom. She said, oh, I would have preferred the headlines at the top. I said, oh, yes, sorry, the computer messed up. But that's the point. So it switches us in more into the human domain, in my view. That's what ChatGPT is doing for us. It's enabling us to be better at the really important human stuff, which is why students come to teachers, we hope. So I think we harness our own power here, not the power of GPT.
Yeah. And the colleague said that the children will lose some skills, and we already lost some skills. We lost the skills we don't need. We didn't lose them, we just don't need them anymore. We are developing some other part of the brain. We don't need a memory anymore, memorize lots of things anymore. We need operational memory more to operate the data, just like computers. You have hard disk with loads of data, and you have operational memory. You can't. You just need to know how to operate the data, not to remember them.
Yeah.
You just have to be aware of that. Somebody. I don't need to know Una's telephone number in my head. Why? why do I have lots of other information more important to keep in my mind than telephone numbers?
So you don't need the knowledge, you need to know where to find the
Yes,
knowledge.
yes. I need a pointer to that information. So I will find the information.
Yeah.
I think we have some questions from online, and then if there's any others in the room, we'll come back to you.
We have
Michael.
one question. Okay, Nikolai. Saw it also. Leslie, would you like to open your microphone and ask the question, please?
Hello.
Hello?
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah?
Oh, good. Yeah, I was reflecting on GPT and the fact that it makes us work more really, because now we can do it so much quicker and so much better. So we work more and we don't do the boring stuff anymore, as you were saying. Do you think this might influence the future and make us more the world would be more competitive and more difficult for the future generations, and maybe it might even widen the social, or it might decrease the social divide? What do you think about that? I mean, something's going to happen. Will it be? Will it make a difference, a positive difference, or might it make it even worse for the poor people, the people who haven't got access maybe to these apps? I don't know.
Thank you,
And
Leslie. Thank you, Leslie.
you.
That's a very good question. Is ChatGPT going to widen the digital divide that's already there? Nikolai, what do you think?
Yeah, I flagged this in the chat that I'm also following here, and I think it's a fascinating question. I don't know. I don't have an answer. My hope is that it can be used in a way to, in fact, increase equality. If we give tools in the hands of people who are underprivileged in social and digital spaces, if we give them those tools without expectations from them, in the sense of be they financial or having some kind of other ulterior motives other than just providing them with tools to give them more access to social and digital participation and to increasing equality, I think it has great potential. But we know that in the real world, things don't always work like that. And we know that there is some work that shows that there is a digital divide, and that increases also the social divide. So I think only the future can tell us, but I am keeping my fingers crossed is what I want to say.
Thank you very much. Any questions from you in the room? We're coming to our final question now. But oh, there's a microphone coming around.
There's one here. I
Oh,
don't know what to do.
You've got stereo microphones coming towards you now.
Thank you very much for such a thought-provoking panel. We've been attending several webinars on ChatGPT to get familiarized with it, because we are training pre-service language teachers in my context in Turkey, and we believe that we should be equipping them with these skills of how to use it instead of, like rejecting or just copying and pasting, as you said. And I really like the point that you said the needs are changing. That's why the skills are to be changed in accordance with that, right? So we've been talking about the 21st century skills, but probably we should be adding like plus, pro, right? 21st century skills, and adding those adaptability, flexibility, like not being resistant to change. So I think that would also, help us better adapt to the changes in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we're coming towards the end and we have coffee break in a minute. So let me ask each of the panelists to give us one final sentence to sum up what they feel about ChatGPT, maybe what they would say to language teachers who are worried about it. So Una and then Alexandra.
embrace all the implications of ChatGPT and harness it for your good as a teacher, first of all.
Sounds good. Alexandra, what do you think?
Okay, develop critical thinking. Yeah, you are talking with a machine, not with a human.
Yeah, it's important to remember that. Yeah, exactly. Nikolai.
Yes, critical thinking. I really agree with this, and lots of learning ahead of us. For we as teachers have the responsibility to learn a lot.
I kind of give the last word to one of the audience online. Abdulaziz gave us a little quote. It's kind of a change of a familiar quote from before. AI will never replace teachers, but teachers who use AI will replace teachers who don't use
Yes,
AI.
absolutely.
That's